At the divorce hearing, my husband was full of arrogance. "You'll never touch me money again." The words echoed through the courtroom so clearly that even the people seated in the back row turned their heads. His mistress smiled beside him, crossing one leg over the other as if she were attending a celebration instead of a legal proceeding. "She doesn't deserve a single dime," she said. A few people exchanged uncomfortable glances. I didn't respond. I simply reached into my purse and slid a sealed envelope across the table. The judge opened it, skimmed first page, then unexpectedly burst out laughing. Not a cruel laugh, not a mocking laugh. The kind of laugh someone makes when they suddenly discover something they weren't expecting. Helen back in his chair and quietly said, "Oh, this is good." The color drained from my husband's face. His mistress stopped smiling, and for the first time in months, I knew something they didn't. My name is Emily Carter. I was 42 years old the day my marriage officially collapsed in public. The strange thing is that by then, I wasn't grieving the marriage anymore. I was grieving the woman I used to be. For 19 years, I had been Michael Turner's wife. For 19 years, I had believed we were building something together. A future, a family. The usual things people promise each other when they stand in front of friends and relatives and swear forever. I met Michel when I was 23. He was confident without seeming arrogant, funny without trying too hard. The kind of man who could walk into a room and make everyone feel comfortable. Back then, I worked as a nurse at a small hospital outside Chicago. Michael was starting a construction company with 2 employees and a borrowed pickup truck. We were not rich. We were barely surviving. I worked double shifts. He worked weekends. Some months, we had to choose between repairing the car and replacing their refrigerator. But we laughed a lot. At least I thought we did. As the years passed, his business grew. The pickup truck became a fleet. The rented office became a building with his name on the front. People started introducing him as a successful businessman. Meanwhile, I continued working in healthcare. Not because I had to, because I loved it. I liked helping people. I liked knowing my work mattered. Michael used to say he admired that about me. Later, he stopped saying it. Success changed him slowly, the way rust spreads across metal, almost invisible at first, then impossible to ignore. He began talking differently, walking differently, treating people differently, especially. Somewhere along the way he stopped seeing me as a partner and started seeing me as part of the furniture, something that had always been there, something he no longer appreciated. Even then, I tried to save the marriage. God knows I tried. Marriage counseling, weekend trips, long conversations, short conversations, patience, forgiveness, more patience. Nothing worked because you can't repair a marriage when only one person is trying to repair it. The first time I suspected another woman existed was about 9 months before the hearing. Michael suddenly became protective of his phone. He started taking business trips that didn't appear in his company calendar. He began spending money in ways that didn't make sense. Expensive restaurants, luxury hotels, jewelry I never received. Whenever I asked questions, he acted offended, as if I were the problem. Perceived trust meant never asking anything. The irony still amazes me. The guilty person always seems to demand trust the loudest. 3 months later, I learned her name, Rachel Dawson. 34 years old, attractive, ambitious, and apparently convinced that my husband was her future husband. I found out completely by accident, or maybe not by accident. Sometimes life gets tired of hiding the truth. I was leaving the hospital after a 14-hour shift when I saw Michael's car parked outside a restaurant 40 minutes from our house. At first, I thought I was mistaken. Then I saw him through the window, laughing, holding her hand, looking happier than he had looked within years. I stood there for less than 30 seconds, then I walked away. No confrontation, no screaming, no dramatic scene, just silence. A silence that lasted much longer than either of them realized. When I finally told Michael I knew he didn't deny it. That hurt more than the affair itself. He simply stared at me and said, "Maybe we both deserve a fresh start." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "A mistake." Just a fresh start. As if 19 years together could be erased with a corporate phrase. 2 weeks later, he filed for divorce. Things became ugly almost immediately. His attorneys were aggressive. His attitude became colder. The man I married disappeared completely. In his place stood someone calculating and impatient. So many determined to win. The worst part wasn't losing my husband. The worst part was watching him enjoy hurting me. The court dates began. The paperwork multiplied. Every meeting felt like a battlefield. Then came the financial disclosures. That was when things stopped making sense. Michael claimed much less income than expected. Several assets seemed to have vanished. Accounts were missing. Transactions didn't add up. When my attorney raised questions, Michael's legal team dismissed them as clerical errors. I wanted to believe that explanation. Life would have been easier if they were right. But something felt wrong. Something deeper than a cheating husband trying to protect his money. The feeling stayed with me, growing stronger every day. And eventually that feeling guided me somewhere neither Michael nor Oracle ever expected. Back in the courtroom the judge continued reading. His expression changed. The amusement faded. Curiosity replaced it. Then concentration. Michael shifted in his scare. Rachel's confidence began to crack. My attorney glanced at me. I kept my face neutral. Months earlier I would have been terrified. Now I was simply waiting. The judge lowered the letter and looked directly at my husband. Turner, he said calmly. Michael straightened his tie. Yes, Your Honor. The judge tapped the envelope against the table. I believe we're going to need some clarification. The room fell silent. And suddenly, for the first time since the divorce began, Michael looked nervous. The judge's words hung in the air like smoke. I believe we're going to need some clarification. For a brief moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Michelle's attorney leaned forward and forced a polite smile. I'm sure we can answer any questions the court may have, Your Honor. The judge nodded slowly. I'm sure you can. Something in his tone made the entire room uncomfortable. The hearing continued, but the atmosphere had changed. Michael felt it. Rachel felt it. And I certainly felt it. The confidence they had carried into that courtroom was beginning to crack. The judge scheduled an additional review and requested supporting documentation content to several transactions mentioned in my letter. Nothing dramatic happened that day. No handcuffs, no verdict, no public humiliation. But as I walked out of the courthouse, I noticed something I hadn't seen in months. Michael wasn't smiling. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment and watched a drain slide down the kitchen window. That place was small compared to the house I'd lived in for nearly 2 decades. The furniture didn't match. The walls were plain. The silence was different, but it was honest. There was something comforting about that. For months, I had been surrounded by lies. Now, at least I knew where I stood. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from my attorney, Diane. Judge requested additional financial records. Call me tomorrow. I stared at the screen. Additional records. That was exactly what Michael didn't want. Because the deeper I looked into his finances, the more questions surfaced. Questions that all traced back to the same period. The period when Raquel entered his life. 9 months earlier, I had still been trying to save me marriage. Looking back, I can see how desperately I wanted to believe Michael. When you've spent 19 years building a life with someone you don't wake up on morning and decide they're a stranger, you search for explanations. Stress, work pressure, depression, anything except the obvious truth. Michael knew that. He counted on it. The change started gradually. He began coming home later than usual. At first it was client meetings, then emergency projects, then overnight trips. His explanations always sounded reasonable. Construction projects often run behind schedule. Clients change plans. Problems happen. I understood that world. I had watched him build the company from nothing. But something felt off. Not because of what he said. Because of how he said it. Every answer seemed rehearsed. Every explanation arrived too quickly. One night I asked a simple question while we were eating dinner. What city are you visiting next week? He froze for less than a second. Most people wouldn't have noticed. I did. Milwaukee. Then I immediately changed the subject. That moment stayed with me. Not because it proved anything. Because it reminded me of something. When people tell the truth, you usually remember where they are going. 3 weeks later, another strange thing happened. I was balancing our household expenses when I noticed a charge from a luxury hotel downtown, nearly $700. Michael wasn't traveling that week. I knew because he'd been home every night. When I asked him about it, I barely glanced at the statement. Business dinner. $700 for dinner? He almost laughed. Instead, I nodded. The next month brought another charge, then another, then another, hotels, restaurants, spa appointments, things that had absolutely nothing to do with construction. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Still, I wasn't ready for the truth. Not yet. The truth arrived one Tuesday evening. I had just finished a brutal shift at the hospital, one of those days that leaves your feet touching and your brain exhausted. That kind of day when all you want is a shower and sleep. Traffic was unusually heavy, so I took an alternate route home. That's when I saw Michael's truck parked outside an upscale restaurant nearly 40 minutes from our neighborhood. At first, I assumed he was meeting a client. Then I looked through the front window and saw them. Michael sat across from a woman with long dark hair, Rachel. Though I didn't know her name yet. They weren't discussing business. They weren't hiding. They looked comfortable, familiar, intimate, like people who had spent many evenings together. I watched Michael reach across the table and take her hand. The gesture was small, natural, practiced. That hurt more than anything because it told me this wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a relationship, a real one. I stood outside for perhaps 20 seconds. Then I turned around and walked back to my car. No tears, no scene, no confrontation. The crying came later, alone, where nobody could see it. For the next several weeks I paid attention. Not because I wanted revenge, because I needed the truth. The truth has a strange quality. Once you suspect it exists, you can't stop looking for it. I noticed Michael smiling at messages he never shared. I noticed him protecting his phone. I noticed how quickly he became irritated whenever I asked normal questions. One evening he stepped into the backyard to take a call. The sliding door wasn't completely closed. I heard him laugh, a laugh I hadn't heard in years. Then he said something that settled everything. I miss you too. Few words landed like a physical blow. Not because they surprised me, because they confirmed what I already knew. Later that night I sat in bed staring at the ceiling while Michael slept beside me or pretended to sleep. I remember realizing something important. The marriage was already over. The paperwork just hadn't caught up yet. 2 weeks later I confronted him. Not dramatically, not angrily, just honestly. Who is she? Michael looked at me for several seconds. No denial, no confusion, no performance, just silence. Then he sighed, and that was somehow worse because guilty pledini. Michael didn't bother. Her name is Rachel. The room felt smaller. My hands felt cold. How long? Several months. Several months. The phrase sounded absurdly small compared to what it actually meant. 19 years on one side, several months on the other, and somehow had chosen. The divorce filing arrived shortly afterward. What I didn't then was that the affair wasn't the biggest secret Michael was hiding. Not even close. Because a few weeks later, while reviewing financial records for the divorce, I discovered a transfer worth nearly $80,000, money that had disappeared from an account we jointly owned. Money Michael claimed didn't exist. Money that had gone somewhere. I stared at that transaction for nearly a minute. Then I checked it again, and again. The number never changed. $80,000 gone. And that was the moment I realized that this story wasn't just about infidelity anymore. Something much bigger was hiding beneath the surface. I stared at the transaction until the numbers began to blur. $80,000, not 800, not 8,000, 80,000 gone. I checked the date again, then the account number, then the routing information. Everything matched. The money had left one of our joint accounts 6 months earlier. The problem was simple. I had never authorized it. At first I assumed there had to be an explanation. A business investment, a temporary transfer, a bookkeeping mistake. But every explanation collapsed the moment I dug deeper. The account receiving the funds wasn't connected to any project I recognized. There was no invoice, no contract, no legitimate paper trail, just money disappearing into a place that seemed designed not to be found. That discovery changed everything. Up until then, I had viewed the divorce as the painful ending of a failed marriage. Now, I began wondering whether I had been living beside a stranger. The next morning, I called Diane, my attorney, listened quietly while I explained what he'd found. "Send me everything," she said. I forwarded the records immediately. An hour later, my phone rang. "Emily," she said, "don't confront them." The seriousness in her voice got my attention. I wasn't planning to. Good. A pause. Because if there's one hidden transfer, there are probably more. I sat back in my chair. The apartment suddenly felt smaller. How many more? I don't know. That answer bothered me more than any number could have. Over the next several weeks, my evenings followed the same routine: work at the hospital, drive home, eat something simple, then spend hours reviewing financial documents, bank statements, tax filings, business disclosures, investment reports. The dining table slowly disappeared beneath stacks of paper. At first, the information seemed random, then patterns emerged. Patterns always tell a story, you just have to learn how to read them. The first thing I noticed was timing. Many unusual transactions began shortly after Rachel entered Michael's life. The second thing I noticed was frequency. Transfers occurred almost every month, some large, some small, most designed to avoid attracting attention. The third thing I noticed made my stomach tighten. Several transfers appeared connected to companies I'd never heard of. Michael owned a construction business. One knew his vendors, his suppliers, his contractors. These names were unfamiliar, very unfamiliar. One company appeared repeatedly: Regolina Consulting. Another was called Summit Development Solutions. The names sounded legitimate, professional, boring even, but something about them felt manufactured, like names chosen from a business name generator. One Friday night I searched public records. Ridgeline Consulting didn't appear where it should, neither did Summit Development Solutions. I checked again, nothing. That was when the feeling returned, the same feeling I'd had outside the restaurant, the feeling that the truth was standing directly in front of me. I just wasn't seeing all of it yet. The following Monday brought another surprise. Diane called during my lunch break. "I want you to meet someone. Who?" "A former accountant." I frowned. "For Michael's company, used to be." That evening we met at a small coffee shop near downtown. The man looked to be in his 60s, gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, careful eyes, the kind of person who spent decades working with numbers. Diane introduced us. The accountant's name was Thomas Reed. He shook my hand politely, then glanced around the room before speaking. "You found some unusual transfers." It wasn't a question. I nodded. Thomas took a sip of coffee. I wondered when someone would notice. The statement sent a chill down my spine. "What does that mean?" He looked at Diane first, then back at me. "Your husband became very interested in moving money around a few years ago." I leaned forward. "Moving money where?" That was always the problem. His expression darkened. I could never get a straight answer. For the next 30 minutes, Thomas explained why he had eventually left the company. Missing documentation, questionable reimbursements, incomplete records, transfers that lacked proper approval. Nothing dramatic by itself, but together, a troubling pattern. "Did you report it?" I asked. I raised concerns. "And?" Thomas laughed softly, not because anything was funny, because had clearly asked himself the question many times. "I was told to focus on accounting." Silence settled between us. Then he said something I still remember word for word. "This isn't just about an affair." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" He folded his hands. "Affairs make people careless." I waited. But these transactions were happening before Ian and I only knew about Rachel. The realization hit me immediately. The affair wasn't the beginning. It was a symptom. Part of something larger, something older, something more dangerous. I drove home that night with radio off. My thoughts were too loud. The city lights blurred through the windshield as questions piled up inside my head. How long had this been happening? What else had Michael hidden? Who knew? Who helped him? And perhaps the most disturbing question of all, had any part of our life together ever been real? When I arrived home, another envelope sat outside my apartment door. No stamp, no return address, nothing. Just my name written across the front. For several seconds I stared at it. Then he carried it inside. The envelope contained only 3 sheets of paper, copies of wire transfers. Nothing else. No explanation, no note, no signature. He spread them across the kitchen table. Each transfer connected 2 accounts I had never seen before. But one detail immediately stood out. The receiving account appeared under a familiar name, Rachel Dawson. My breath caught. The transfers weren't small. $20,000, $35,000, $15,000, repeated over time. Money moving from places Michael claimed didn't exist, straight into accounts linked to his mistress. I lowered myself into a chair. For several moments I simply stared. The affair had already destroyed my marriage. Now it appeared connected to something far bigger. My phone rang. Diane. I answered immediately. You are not going to believe what I just found, she sighed. I was about to say the same thing. My stomach tightened. What happened? The court approved additional discovery. That was good news, but Diane didn't sound relieved. She sounded concerned. Emily, she said carefully, there's another company. I looked down at the paperwork scattered across my table. Another one. Yes. A pause. And whoever created it worked very hard to keep it hidden. I closed my eyes. The list kept growing. The lies, the money, the fake companies, the missing records. Every answer seemed to create 3 new questions. Then Diane said something that made the room feel suddenly cold. Tomorrow we're meeting a forensic investigator. I swallowed. Why? Silence. Then, because I don't think your husband is just hiding assets anymore. The words hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable. What do you think he's hiding? Diane took a breath. When she finally spoke, her voice was almost a whisper. I think your husband may have committed a crime. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw numbers, transfers, account numbers, company names, dates. The pieces were finally beginning to fit together, but the picture they formed was uglier than I had imagined. At 6 o'clock the next morning, I was already sitting at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes earlier. The stack of documents beside me looked more like a criminal investigation than a divorce case. Diane arrived shortly after 8 o'clock. She wasn't alone. The forensic investigator was a woman named Christine Hill. Early 50s, sharp eyes, calm voice, the kind of person who could make uncomfortable truths sound completely ordinary. She spent nearly 3 hours reviewing records. When she finally looked up, her expression remained professional. That worried me more than if she had looked shocked. People who work around fraud don't get shocked easily. What do you think? I asked. Christine folded her hands. I think Simeone worked very hard to make this look complicated. Diane frowned. Meaning? Christine pointed to several transactions. Real fraud often hides behind complexity. The goal is to make people give up before they understand what they're looking at. She tapped another page. This isn't complex. Diane leaned forward. What is it? Christine's answer came immediately. It's sloppy. I stared at her. Sloppy, she nodded. Whoever did this believed that nobody would ever look closely. A strange feeling moved through me. Not satisfaction, not relief. Something closer to certainty. For months, Michael had acted untouchable. Now, for the first time I realized he might simply have been careless. Careless because he believed I would never question him. Careless because he believed I would never fight back. Careless because he believed he was smarter than everyone else. Those kinds of people usually make mistakes, big ones. By noon, Christine had identified several major problems: hidden transfers, undisclosed accounts, payments connected to Rachel, suspicious company records. Nothing had been officially proven yet, but that pattern was impossible to ignore. When the meeting ended, Diane remained behind. We sat quietly in my apartment while afternoon sunlight crossed the floor. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, she broke the silence. There's something I need to ask you. I looked up. What? How far do you want to take this? The question surprised me. What do you mean? Diane sighed. This started as a divorce. She gestured toward the mountain of evidence. It may become something else. I understood immediately. Investigations, potential criminal exposure, public consequences, things far bigger than dividing marital assets. For a moment, I looked toward the window. People walked along the sidewalk below. Cars passed. Life continued normally. Yet, my entire future seemed balanced on a single decision. I don't want revenge, I said finally. Diane studied me. I believe you. I just want the truth. She nodded. Then keep going. That night I began writing. Not because Diane suggested it. Not because the court required it. Because I needed to organize everything she had learned. At first I planned to create a simple timeline. Dates, transactions, events. Nothing more. But deeper I went, the clearer the story became. A story built entirely from facts. No accusations. No emotional language. No dramatic claims. Just evidence. 1 page became 2. 2 became 5. 5 became 10. I worked until nearly midnight. Then stopped. The next evening I continued. Then again the following night. By the end of the week he had assembled something surprisingly powerful. Not because it was clever, because it was simple. The facts spoke for themselves. Every transfer connected to a date. Every date connected to an event. Every event connected to documentation. The entire pattern became visible. For months Michael had relied on confusion. Now confusion was disappearing. One evening while reviewing the final draft I noticed something unexpected. A single inconsistency, small, almost invisible. A transfer dated 3 days after Michael claimed he had no access to a particular account. I checked the records again. Then again. My pulse accelerated. There it was. A direct contradiction, not suspicion, not interpretation, a contradiction. The kind judges notice immediately. The kind lawyers fear. I highlighted it and placed the document aside. By then I understood something important. The strongest evidence wasn't always the largest transaction. Sometimes it was the smallest mistake. The hearing approached quickly. Meanwhile Michael remained confident, painfully confident. His attorney filed motions. Rachel continued appearing beside him. Every report from court suggested they believed victory was inevitable. Diane and I met one final time before the hearing. We reviewed strategy, evidence, possible arguments. Then she asked the question that mattered most. Do you want to submit all of this now? I looked down at the folder. Dozens of pages, months of work, years of lies. No. Diane raised an eyebrow. No. I shook my head. Not all of it. She waited. I reached into my bag and removed a sealed envelope. A much smaller package. Inside was something different. Not a legal brief. Not a financial report. A letter. My letter. The same letter I had spent nights rewriting, removing emotion, removing anger, removing everything except facts. Diane looked at it, then looked at me. You want the judge to read this? Yes. She studied my face for several seconds, then smiled. Not because she knew what would happen. Because she finally understood what I was doing. The letter wasn't evidence. It was a map, a guide, a way of helping someone else see what I had spent months uncovering. The morning of the hearing arrived gray and cold. Dressed carefully. Simple navy blazer, white blouse. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic. I wasn't trying to impress Yoni. I was trying to remain steady. Outside the courthouse, reporters stood near the entrance. Apparently word of financial disputes had started attracting attention. Diane met me near security. Ready? I considered the question. Was I ready? No, probably not. Nobody is truly ready to watch their marriage collapse in public. But I was ready for the truth. And that would have to be enough. We entered the courtroom. Michael was already there. Rachel beside him. Both looked relaxed, confident, victorious. When Michael saw me, he smiled. The same smile he'd worn for months. The smile of a man who believed that the outcome had already been decided. I returned to my seat. Diane organized her files. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The hearing began. And when the moment finally arrived, I reached into my purse, removed the envelope, and quietly slid it across the table. The judge opened it, started reading, then suddenly stopped. A slow smile appeared in his face, and for the first time all morning, Michael's confidence deepened. For several seconds, the courtroom was completely silent. The judge continued reading. Michael shifted in his chair. Rachel glanced at him, then back at the judge. Neither of them knew what was written inside the envelope. That uncertainty was already making them uncomfortable. The judge reached the second page, then the third. A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. Finally, he placed the letter on the bench and looked directly at Michael. Mr. Turner. Michael straightened dimity. Yes, Your Honor. The judge tapped the document lightly. I have a few questions. The confidence in Michael's face remained, but I noticed something small. His jaw tightened, only slightly. Most people wouldn't have seen it. After 19 years of marriage, I did. The judge lifted a page. In your sworn financial disclosure, you stated that you had no control over certain accounts after February of last year. That's correct. The answer came quickly. Too quickly. The judge nodded. Then he read a date, a transaction amount, an account number. The exact information I had highlighted weeks earlier. Can you explain why records show you personally authorized a transfer from that account 3 days later? Michael froze. Just for a second, but it was enough. His attorney leaned toward him. Michael cleared his throat. There may be an error in the documentation. The judge looked unimpressed. An error? Possibly. The judge set the page down. Interesting. The room remained silent. Nobody wanted to interrupt. Nobody wanted to breathe. Because everyone could feel something changing. The judge continued. Then perhaps you can explain second issue. He picked up another document. This time Michael's attorney stood. Your Honor, we haven't reviewed these materials in full. The judge didn't even look up. You'll have an opportunity. Then he continued reading. The next 15 minutes felt surreal. One question led to another. One answer led to a contradiction. Every contradiction exposed a new problem. Not dramatic problems. Not movie-style revelations. Rule problems. The kind built from records and signatures and dates. The kind judges take seriously. By the time the judge reached the fourth inconstancy, Michael no longer looked relaxed. He looked irritated, then frustrated, then worried. Rachel wasn't smiling anymore. She sat perfectly still beside him. The woman who had looked so confident earlier now avoided eye contact with everyone in the room. Then came the first major blow. The judge lifted a page from the file Christine had helped us organize. Let's discuss Ridgeline Consulting. The name landed like a brick. I watched Michael's eyes narrow. Ridgeline provided consultant services. The judge raised an eyebrow. What services? Michael hesitated. Business consulting. The judge waited. The silence stretched. What kind of business consulting? Michael opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No answer came. The judge nodded slowly. I see. His tone suggested he saw much more than Michael realized. Diane stood. Your Honor, we'd like to submit supporting document related to Ridgeline Consulting. The judge accepted the documents. A few minutes later another company appeared. Summit Development Solutions. Then another and another. The pattern was impossible to miss now. Money moving between entities with little evidence of actual business activity. Large sums, repeated transfers, questionable records. Michael's attorney objected repeatedly. The judge overruled repeatedly. Meanwhile, the courtroom atmosphere continued shifting. People weren't watching a divorce anymore. They were watching something unravel. Then Rochelle's name entered the discussion. That changed everything. Diane approached the witness stand. Your Honor, we'd also like to address several transfers connected to Ms. Rochelle Dawson. The room became even quieter. Rachel visibly stiffened. The judge nodded. Proceed. Diane displayed their cords. Transfer amounts, dates, account numbers. Nothing emotional. Nothing exaggerated. Just facts. Rachel stared at the paperwork. Her face slowly lost color. The judge reviewed the documents, then looked directly at her. Ms. Dawson, were you aware of these payments? Rachel swallowed. For the first time all morning, she seemed genuinely frightened. I don't know what those are. Diane remained calm. Are you saying these accounts do not belong to you? Rachel hesitated. The hesitation lasted only a moment, but it was enough. No. Diane handed another document to the court. The judge studied it, then looked back at Rachel. According to this record, they do. A murmur spread throughout the courtroom. Rachel looked toward Michelle. Looking for help. Looking for guidance. Looking for something. Michael avoided her eyes. That moment told me everything. The partnership that had seemed so strong was breaking apart. Not because of love. Because pressure reveals character. And pressure was everywhere now. The judge called a short recess. The second he left the room, chaos erupted. Lawyers gathered in corners. Whispers spread through the gallery. People exchanged theories. Meanwhile, Michael sat motionless, staring at the table. Rachel leaned toward him. What are they talking about? He didn't answer. She asked again, still nothing. For the first time, I realized Draco might not know everything. Shek knew enough, but not everything, and that terrified her. Diane and I stepped into the hallway. She looked more energized than I had seen her in months. He's falling apart. I nodded. Do you think the judge sees it? Diane actually lied. The judge saw it 30 minutes ago. That answer gave me no satisfaction, only relief, because for months I had felt like I was screaming into the wind. Now someone else finally saw what I saw. The recess ended. Everyone returned to their seats. The judge entered. The room immediately settled. He reviewed several pages silently, then he looked directly at Michael. His voice remained calm, professional, controlled, which somehow made the moment more frightening. Turner. Michael stood. Yes, Your Honor. The judge folded his hands. Based on the information currently before this court, I have serious concerns regarding the accuracy of your disclosures. Michael's face turned pale. The judge continued. I am ordering an immediate forensic review of all financial records connected to this matter. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The words landed with enormous weight. A forensic review. Exactly what Michael had spent months trying to avoid. His attorney immediately stood. Your Honor. The judge raised a hand. The attorney sat down. The courtroom fell silent again. Then the judge delivered these sentences that changed everything. Additionally, I believe there is sufficient cause to refer portions of these records for further investigation. I heard Rachel inhale sharply. Michael looked as though someone had punched him. For months he had treated this divorce like a game he had already won. Now the rules had changed. The hearing ended shortly afterward. People began filing out. Reporters hurried toward the exits. Attorneys gathered documents. The noise returned, but Michael remained seated, staring forward, motionless. Eventually he stood and turned toward him. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he asked the question I never expected to hear. How much do you know? His voice sounded different, smaller. I met his eyes, and for the first time in months, I didn't see confidence. I saw fear. I gave him a simple answer. Not enough. Because that truth was we had only just begun. The question followed me all the way home. How much do you know? Michael had skedaddled as if the answer might save him. As if there were still some version of reality where he could negotiate his way out of what was happening. But something fundamental had changed in that courtroom. For the first time since the divorce began, Michael wasn't controlling the story anymore. The facts were. And facts don't care how persuasive you are, they don't care how much money you have, they don't care how long you've spent convincing people you're the smartest person in the room. Facts simply exist. The forensic review began the following week. What started as a divorce case quickly expanded into something much larger. Diane kept warning me to stay patient. The process would take time. She was right. It took weeks, then months. The investigators examined everything. Business records, transfers, corporate accounts, tax filings, email correspondence. The deeper they looked, the more questions appeared. Questions Mitchell couldn't answer. Questions nobody on his legal team seemed eager to discuss. One afternoon, Diane called while I was finishing paperwork at the hospital. I knew from her voice that something important had happened. They finished the preliminary report. I closed my office door. What did they find? A brief silence. Then, most of what we suspected. I sat down slowly. The chair suddenly felt unstable beneath me. What happens now? Now, she said, people start protecting themselves. I didn't fully understand what she meant, not until the following days. That's when the cracks became impossible to ignore. Michael's attorney withdrew from several aspects of the case. Nothing dramatic, nothing public, just quiet legal distancing. Then came reports that certain business partners were refusing new projects. Investors became cautious. Lenders began asking questions. The confidence Michael had built his reputation on started disappearing. Not because someone attacked him, because a trust was leaving the room, and trust rarely returns once it walks away. Rachel disappeared almost completely. For weeks nobody saw her. No social media updates, no appearances, no public support, nothing. The woman who had sat beside Michael so proudly in court suddenly wanted distance. I couldn't blame her. People often enjoy standing next to power. Few enjoy standing next to consequences. One evening I returned to the house, my house. For months I had referred to it as Michael's house in Mimond. Not because it legally belonged to him, because he had convinced me I no longer belonged there. Now things were different. The temporary court order had restored access while the financial matters continued. Walking through the front door felt strange, familiar, yet completely unfamiliar. The photographs remained. The furniture remained. Fuels remained. But the illusion was gone. The illusion that this house represented a perfect marriage. I stood in the living room for several minutes, not crying, not angry, just observing. 19 years of memories lived inside those walls. Some good, some painful, some now impossible to separate from the lies. My phone buzzed. A message from Diane. Call me when you can. I called immediately. She answered on the first ring. The judge issued his ruling. For a second my heart stopped. I had realized how much tension I was still carrying until that moment. What happened? Diane exhaled. The court granted your financial claims. I closed my eyes. Relief washed through me. No excitement, relief. The kind that arrives after carrying a heavy weight for too long, Diane continued. The concealed assets issue played a major role. I leaned against the kitchen counter. The room felt unusually quiet. What about Michael? Another pause. He's facing several problems. That was the professional way of saying his situation had become very serious. I thanked her. We spoke for a few more minutes, then the call ended. I stood alone in the kitchen. The same kitchen where I had cooked thousands of meals, celebrated birthdays, hosted holidays, planned vacations, argued, laughed, dreamed. For years I had believed losing my marriage would destroy me. I was wrong. The thing that nearly destroyed me wasn't losing marriage. It was losing myself inside it. A few weeks later I saw Michael for the final time. Not at a hearing, not at a legal meeting, just outside a building downtown. A chance encounter. He looked older, much older. Only a few months had passed, yet the difference was unmistakable. The confidence was gone. The easy smile was gone. The certainty was gone. For a moment we simply looked at each other. To people who once shared a life. To strangers connected by history. Finale spoke. How long did you know? The same question. The same need for an answer. I thought about everything that had happened. The affair, the lies, the hidden money, the courtroom, the letter, the investigation, the months off for building my life. Then I gave him the truth. Long enough. He stared at me, perhaps expecting more. An accusation, a speech, a final argument. I had none to offer. Some chapters don't need dramatis endings. They just need to end. I wished him well. Not because he deserved it, because carrying bitterness any longer would only hurt me. Then I walked away, and that was it. No grand revenge, no celebration, no applause. Just a woman continuing her life. Several months later I sat outside a small coffee shop on a cool autumn morning. Leaves drifted across the sidewalk. People hurried to work. The city moved forward. So did I. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about court dates, or lawyers, or evidence, or betrayal. I was thinking about the future. A future that belonged entirely to me. At 42 years old, I had believed my life was ending. Instead, it was beginning again. Not perfectly, not magically, but honestly. And honesty turned out to be worth far more than anything Michael had ever promised me. If there's one thing this experience taught him, it's that the truth has incredible patience. People can hide it, delay it, bury it beneath lies. But eventually, it finds its way to the surface. Always, for 19 years, I thought I needed my husband's love to feel secure. Then I thought I needed justice to feel whole. In the end, I needed neither. What I needed was myself. And the day I finally got myself back was the day I truly became free. If this story touched you in any way, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had a moment when that truth changed everything? Leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. We share stories like this every day. Stories about resilience, courage, and finding your way through life's hardest moments. If you'd like to join us on that journey, subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Until next time, take care of yourself and remember that your dignity is worth protecting.
Thanks for watching. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.